am Marie, 28 years old and the middle child of the prestigious Anderson family of Boston. Growing up, I always felt like the black sheep, never quite fitting the mold my parents created. When I passed the bar exam last month, instead of joining the family business, I thought they might finally be proud. I was wrong. Last night, I returned home for a family dinner celebrating my brother's engagement. The moment I walked through those familiar doors, I felt the tension. I never imagined that by dessert, my parents would look me in the eye and say the words that changed everything. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I rebuilt my life after being disowned by the family I thought would always stand by me. Growing up in Beacon Hill meant more than just having a prestigious address. Our 5-story brownstone overlooked Boston Common, its interior filled with antiques and artwork that had been in the Anderson family for generations. My father, James Anderson, built Anderson Development into a real estate empire worth hundreds of millions. My mother, Eleanor, came from old money herself and managed our family's image with precision and calculation. From the moment we could understand words, my siblings and I knew what was expected. Anderson children went to Phillips Academy, then Harvard Business School, and then joined the family company. My older brother Thomas followed this path perfectly. 6 feet tall, with our father's strong jawline and our mother's charm, he was groomed to take over from day one. He excelled at everything from sailing to finance, making connections with all the right people, and dating all the right girls. My younger sister Amanda was the family rebel, but only in ways that were ultimately acceptable. She chose Brown instead of Harvard, studied art history instead of business, but still maintained the proper social connections and dated the son of one of father's golf buddies. Her minor rebellions were tolerated because she never truly threatened the family's image. Then there was me. From an early age, I questioned things the others accepted. Why did we have so much when others had so little? Why did appearance matter more than substance? Why did the family donate to charities but speak disparagingly about the people those charities helped? When I was 16, I volunteered at a legal aid clinic for a school project. Watching those attorneys help people who had nowhere else to turn ignited something in me. I saw a path that held meaning beyond profit margins and social standing. When it came time for college, I still went to Harvard as expected, but I focused on pre-law instead of business. The arguments were endless. Father would pound the mahogany dining table, his face turning that particular shade of crimson reserved for my transgressions. My mother was more subtle, but equally devastating. She would sigh deeply and say things like, "We gave you every advantage, Marie. Why must you insist on disappointing us?" Still, they funded my education, perhaps hoping I would come to my senses. I excelled academically, graduating summa cum laude, thinking my achievements might finally earn their respect. Instead, my mother simply said, "What a waste of a brilliant business mind." When I told her I had been accepted to Harvard Law, throughout law school, our relationship grew increasingly strained. Every holiday dinner became a battlefield. Even as they paid my tuition and rent for my Cambridge apartment, they made it clear this was an investment they expected returns on. Eventually, they thought I would see reason and join Anderson Development as their in-house counsel, at the very least. But the more I learned about the law, the more I was drawn to public interest work. During my summers, while Thomas interned at investment banks and Amanda toured European galleries, I worked at nonprofits helping domestic violence survivors navigate the legal system. When I passed the bar exam last month, I thought perhaps they might finally be proud. I had accomplished something difficult, something meaningful. I had opportunities at several prestigious firms, but I was leaning toward a position at a legal aid clinic similar to the one that had inspired me years ago. The night before the fateful dinner, I stood outside my apartment building, phone in hand, heart pounding, as I called my mother to share the news. "Would you be willing to add this accomplishment to the family newsletter?" I asked, referring to the quarterly update she sent to their extensive social circle. "Marie," she said with that familiar chill in her voice, "passing an exam that thousands of people pass every year is hardly newsworthy. Now, Thomas's engagement to Stephanie Lawrence, that's something worth celebrating." I should have known then that the dinner would be disastrous. Stephanie Lawrence was the daughter of one of my father's closest business associates. Their union would merge two powerful families, creating new opportunities for Anderson Development to expand into international markets. Yet somehow, I still held on to hope. As I arrived at the family home that evening, I wore a conservative navy dress my mother had once complimented, styled my dark hair in the smooth waves she preferred over my natural curls, and even wore the pearl earrings my grandmother had left me, a small reminder of the only family member who had ever truly accepted me. As I walked up the granite steps to the imposing front door, I touched those pearls for courage. I thought, naively, that perhaps this time would be different. Perhaps this time they would see me. The Anderson family dining room was a monument to old money. A crystal chandelier hung over a mahogany table that could seat 20, though tonight it was set for just 6. The Waterford crystal gleamed under the light, reflecting onto sterling silver place settings that had been in the family for 4 generations. Fresh flowers from Mother's garden filled the antique vase at the center, their fragrance mixing with the aroma of whatever gourmet meal our private chef had prepared. I was the last to arrive. Thomas stood by the fireplace, one arm around his new fiancée. Stephanie Lawrence was exactly the kind of woman my parents approved of, tall, blonde, impeccably dressed in a designer outfit that probably cost more than most people make in a month. She had graduated from Wellesley with a degree in art history and worked at a prestigious gallery owned by a family friend. Her father ran Lawrence International, a shipping conglomerate that could open new markets for Anderson development. My sister Amanda sat at the table, already scrolling through her phone, looking bored. At 25, she had mastered the art of appearing disinterested while missing nothing. "Good of you to join us, Marie," my father said, checking his Patek Philippe watch. I was actually 5 minutes early, but in the Anderson household, early meant 15 minutes before the stated time. Mother air-kissed my cheeks, careful not to smudge her perfect makeup. "You could have done something more with your hair," she whispered as she pulled away. Thomas brought Stephanie forward. "Marie, you remember Stephanie?" Of course, I said, though we had only met twice at charity galas. "Congratulations on your engagement." "Thank you," Stephanie replied with practiced warmth. "Thomas has told me so much about you and your unique career choices." The subtle emphasis on unique did not escape me. In our social circle, public interest law was considered charity work, not a real career. "Dinner is served," announced Wilson, our butler of 30 years, as he held the door for the serving staff. We took our places at the table, father at the head, mother at the foot, Thomas and Stephanie on one side, Amanda and me on the other. The first course was served, a delicate lobster bisque that probably cost more than what my potential legal aid clients earned in a day. "Thomas, tell Marie about the proposal," Mother prompted as we began to eat. "She loves to hear about romantic gestures. Don't you, dear?" I nodded, though romance had never been a topic we discussed. Thomas launched into the story of how he had proposed to Stephanie on his private yacht in the Mediterranean, complete with flying in a violinist from Vienna and having a Michelin-starred chef prepare dinner. As he spoke, I noticed my father watching me with that calculating look I knew so well. He was waiting for me to say something inappropriate, to reveal my misguided values, as he called them. When Thomas finished his story, I smiled and said, "That sounds lovely. I'm happy for you both." A brief look of disappointment crossed my father's face. He had wanted me to object, to give him an excuse. The main course arrived, perfectly seared duck breast with a cherry reduction. As the conversation turned to wedding plans, I saw an opportunity to share my own news. "I passed the bar exam," I said during a brief lull. "I'd like to thank you both for supporting my education, even though I know it wasn't the path you would have chosen for me." The table fell silent. Mother sipped her wine. Father cut his duck with precise movements. Finally, he spoke. "Passing an exam is hardly an achievement worth mentioning at the same dinner where we're celebrating your brother's engagement. But since you've brought it up, have you reconsidered my offer to join the legal department at Anderson?" I took a deep breath. "Actually, I've been offered a position at the Boston Legal Aid Foundation. It's the organization that inspired me to become a lawyer in the first place." Father set down his knife and fork with deliberate slowness. "The legal aid place where you volunteered in high school? That little charity operation? It's actually one of the most respected public interest law organizations in Massachusetts," I said, feeling my heartbeat quicken. "They help people who have nowhere else to turn." Thomas cleared his throat uncomfortably. Stephanie looked down at her plate. Amanda watched with undisguised interest. Mother spoke next, her voice dangerously soft. "Marie, we've tolerated your phase of rebellion. We've paid for your education at the finest institutions, and this is how you repay us? By throwing it all away to work with those people. Those people are citizens who deserve legal representation," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "The position would allow me to make a real difference." "A real difference?" Father scoffed. "The only difference you're making is embarrassing this family. Do you have any idea how it looks when people ask what my daughter does and I have to tell them she's chosen to work with criminals and welfare cases? That's not what your brother is making something of himself," he continued, his voice rising. "He's bringing value to this family. He's marrying a woman who understands her role in society. And you, after everything we've given you, you choose to throw it back in our faces. I never asked to be part of a family that values money over people." The words escaped before I could stop them. The room went utterly silent. Even the staff froze in place. Father stood slowly, his napkin falling to the floor. His face had gone from red to an alarming purple. "Then perhaps you shouldn't be part of this family at all," he said, each word like ice. "If you insist on this path, you are no longer welcome here. You are not part of this family anymore. Don't come back." I stared at him in shock. James, Mother said quietly, but she made no move to contradict him. I looked at my siblings. Thomas stared at his plate. Amanda looked at me with wide eyes but remained silent. Father, you can't mean, I began. Wilson, he interrupted. Please escort my former daughter out. Her apartment keys should be on the hall table. Make sure she takes them, as she'll find her financial access has been revoked effective immediately. Wilson, who had watched me grow up, who had bandaged my skinned knees and smuggled me cookies when I was sent to bed without dinner, looked pained, but he nodded. This way, Miss Marie, he said in a daze. I stood and followed him to the foyer. Behind me, I heard the dinner conversation resume as if nothing had happened, as if I had never existed. Wilson handed me my coat and a small envelope containing my keys. I'm sorry, miss, he whispered. This isn't right. I stepped outside into the cool evening air. The door closed behind me with a definitive click. I heard the lock turn. I stood there frozen, staring at the locked door. The key to my childhood home now useless in my hand. That night was the longest of my life. I took a taxi back to my Cambridge apartment, a luxury 2-bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows and a doorman that my parents had insisted on for my safety. The irony wasn't lost on me as I realized I could no longer afford to live there. I sat on my designer couch in the dark, trying to process what had happened. The shock kept me from crying at first. This was a nightmare. I would wake from it surely. My parents had been disappointed in me before, angry even, but disowning me entirely? It seemed unreal. My phone buzzed at 11:30. It was Amanda. Marie, are you okay? She asked, her voice hushed. She was clearly hiding somewhere in the house to make this call. What do you think? I managed to say, it's insane, she said. I can't believe they did this. Father had Wilson change all the locks tonight, even the gate code. Did you or Thomas say anything after I left? I asked. There was a pause. Thomas said, you brought it on yourself. Stephanie looked uncomfortable but didn't speak up. I tried to defend you, Amanda continued, but Father threatened to do the same to me if I didn't drop it. I wasn't surprised. Thomas had always been Father's perfect soldier. And Amanda was still financially dependent, still living at home while working at her gallery job that paid mostly in prestige. Marie, Amanda continued, there's more. Father called the family financial advisor right after dinner. He's freezing all your accounts and canceling your credit cards. The numbness began to give way to panic. But my rent is due next week. And I don't start the new job until next month. How am I supposed to? I know, she interrupted. I can loan you some money from my personal account, but not much. Father's watching mine, too. After we hung up, I checked my bank accounts. My checking account, which had held approximately $5,000 that morning, now showed a zero balance. My savings account, which had contained the remainder of my last semester's living expenses, about $15,000, was similarly empty. The credit card I had used for years was declined when I tried to order food delivery. In the span of a few hours, I had gone from financial security to nothing. The morning brought no relief. I woke to an email from my landlord. Apparently, my father had contacted him directly to inform him that they would no longer be guarantors on my lease. With no income yet and no savings, I had 30 days to either provide a new guarantor or vacate the apartment. I called the Boston Legal Aid Foundation, hoping I could start work early. The office manager was sympathetic but explained that their budget was strictly allocated by grant cycles. The position didn't officially begin for another 3 weeks, and even then, the starting salary was a modest $45,000 a year. After taxes, it would barely cover a studio apartment in a safe neighborhood. By noon, I had called 6 friends, explaining my situation. 5 expressed sympathy but offered no concrete help. The 6th, Jasmine, a law school classmate who came from a middle-class background and understood financial struggle in a way my other friends didn't, offered her couch until I figured things out. I can't pay you right away, I admitted. Humiliated, we all need help sometimes, she said simply. Just pitch in for groceries when you can. That afternoon, I began the painful process of dismantling my life. I called moving companies for quotes to put my furniture in storage, but even the cheapest was beyond my non-existent budget. Eventually, I posted my designer furniture on various resale sites, selling pieces for a fraction of their worth just to have some cash. The next day, I walked into a pawn shop for the first time in my life. Grandmother's pearl necklace in hand, the matching piece to the earrings I'd worn at the dinner. The shop owner offered me $800. The necklace was worth at least 10 times that, but I needed the money desperately. I'll give you a receipt, he said kindly, noting my expression. You can buy it back within 90 days. I nodded, my throat tight, as I handed over one of the few meaningful connections to my past. The following week was a crash course in real-world economics. I learned to comparison shop at grocery stores, buying store brands instead of the premium products I'd never thought twice about. I discovered the public library offered free internet, saving me from having to pay for coffee at cafes to use their Wi-Fi while job hunting. I found out which restaurants threw away good food at closing time. Living on Jasmine's couch was another education. Her apartment in Somerville was a third the size of mine and shared with another roommate. The furniture was mismatched, the appliances outdated, but there was a warmth to it my perfect apartment had lacked. They cooked together instead of ordering in. They had friends over for game nights instead of attending exclusive events. Is this how normal people live? I wondered one night, helping them prepare a pasta dinner that would feed all three of us for less than $20.2 weeks after being disowned. I accepted a temporary position at a document review company. A mind-numbing job that paid just enough to contribute to Jasmine's household and save a little toward my own place. It wasn't what I had gone to Harvard Law for, but it would bridge the gap until my real job started. At night, I still cried myself to sleep, the pain of rejection raw and constant. But something else was growing alongside the hurt, a resilience I hadn't known I possessed. For the first time in my life, I was standing completely on my own. It was terrifying, yes, but also strangely liberating. Then, exactly 1 week after that fateful dinner, an email arrived that would change everything again. The sender, George Hamilton, my father's longtime attorney. The subject line, urgent. Please call immediately. I stared at the email on Jasmine's laptop, my heart pounding. What more could they do to me? Had they found some way to interfere with my job offer? Were they suing me for something? My mind raced through increasingly dire scenarios. The email itself was brief and professional. Dear Miss Anderson, a matter of extreme urgency has come to my attention regarding your financial situation. Please contact me at your earliest convenience to discuss. This is time sensitive and impacts you directly. Regards, George Hamilton, Hamilton and Associates. I showed the email to Jasmine, who frowned. Sounds fishy. Why would your parents' lawyer reach out if they've cut you off? I don't know, I admitted. But George has known me since I was a child. He always seemed fair, even kind, despite being father's attorney. After debating for an hour, I finally called the number in the email signature, Hamilton and Associates. How may I direct your call? Came the receptionist's polite voice. This is Marie Anderson for George Hamilton, I said, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. After a brief hold, George's familiar voice came on the line. Marie, thank you for calling. I was concerned you might ignore my message. I considered it, I admitted. I'm not exactly eager to hear more bad news from my family's representatives. He cleared his throat uncomfortably. This isn't what you think. Is there any way we could meet in person? This matter is delicate. My suspicion grew, but curiosity won out. I'd be willing to meet in a public place, I said cautiously. We agreed on a coffee shop near Boston Common the next day. I arrived early, choosing a table with a clear view of the entrance and exit. When George walked in, I was struck by how tired he looked. The always impeccable attorney seemed to have aged years in just a week. Marie, he said, taking the seat across from me. Thank you for agreeing to meet. What's this about, George? I asked directly. He glanced around, then lowered his voice. Are you familiar with the trust your grandmother established for you before she died? I frowned, confused. Grandma Rose had died when I was 16. She had been my father's mother, but nothing like him, warm, compassionate, interested in my dreams rather than how they reflected on the family. I knew she had left some money to each grandchild. But the details had always been managed by my parents. I know she left each of us something. But father said it was just a small education fund that was used up during college, I replied. George looked pained. That isn't accurate. Your grandmother established a substantial trust for each grandchild. Thomas received his when he turned 25, as stipulated in the trust documents. Amanda will receive hers next year. And mine? I asked, a strange feeling growing in my stomach. Yours was different, he explained. Your grandmother saw something in you, Marie. She specified that your trust would be accessible when you either turned 30 or completed graduate school, whichever came first. The funds were designated specifically for education and housing. I tried to process this information. So there's a trust in my name. How much are we talking about? George took a deep breath. $2 million. The coffee shop seemed to spin around me. $2 million. And my parents never told me. The trust has been actively managed and has grown significantly since your grandmother established it, George continued. As the family attorney, I've been overseeing all three trusts. But your parents have been the designated administrators until the distribution conditions were met. Which means they controlled it until now, he confirmed. When you passed the bar exam, you fulfilled the graduate education requirement. The trust should have transferred to your control immediately. I sat back, stunned. Then why didn't it? George looked deeply uncomfortable. Your father instructed me not to process the transfer. When I reminded him that this was legally required, he suggested there were ways to reinterpret the trust language or delay the process indefinitely. My shock gave way to anger. They've been stealing from me. Not technically stealing, he clarified quickly. The funds are still there, but they have been borrowing against the trust assets for various family business purposes, which is a clear violation of their fiduciary duty as trustees. I stared at him. George, why are you telling me this? You're their lawyer, not mine. He met my eyes directly. Because what they're doing is illegal, and as an officer of the court, I cannot be party to it. When your father asked me to draw up new documents removing you from various family holdings following your disagreement last week, I had to review all the relevant financial structures. That's when I realized the extent of the irregularities with your trust. I suddenly understood, you think I'm going to sue them, and by extension, you. He nodded grimly. If you consulted any competent attorney with this information, that's exactly what would happen, and you'd win. I'm trying to resolve this before it reaches that point. So, what's happening now? I asked. Your parents want to meet. They've suggested my office tomorrow afternoon. I wanted to brief you first so you understand your position. My position? George leaned forward. Marie, you have all the leverage here. They know it, and they're panicking. That's why your father has suddenly had a change of heart about your place in the family. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother, the first contact since the dinner. Marie, darling, we need to talk. Your father was upset and said things he didn't mean. Family is everything to us. Please come home. I showed George the message. He nodded knowingly. After George left, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour, trying to absorb everything. My grandmother had believed in me enough to set aside this fortune specifically for me. My parents had hidden it, used it, and only now that they were caught were they suddenly interested in reconciliation. That evening, I met with a financial advisor George had recommended, someone with no connection to my family. She confirmed everything he had said and outlined my options going forward. As I walked back to Jasmine's apartment, I felt a strange sense of calm replacing the turmoil of the past week. For the first time since that dinner, I knew exactly what I needed to do. The offices of Hamilton and Associates occupied the 15th floor of a sleek downtown building with views of Boston Harbor. I had been there many times as a child, accompanying my father to legal meetings, always told to sit quietly and observe how real business was conducted. Today, I arrived not as James Anderson's dutiful daughter, but as Marie Anderson, attorney at law, with my own legal representation beside me. Susan Park was a formidable litigator specializing in trust law, recommended by one of my law professors. When I explained my situation, she took my case immediately. Intrigued by both the legal issues and, I suspected, the chance to go up against the powerful Anderson family. We are not going in there looking for a fight, she had advised during our preparation. But we are absolutely prepared for one. The receptionist, who had known me for years, did a double take when I gave my name. She glanced nervously at Susan before directing us to the conference room. Inside, my parents were already seated on one side of the massive table. Father looked immaculate as always in a bespoke suit, but I could see the tension in his jaw. Mother wore a conservative St. John knit ensemble, her pearls gleaming, her face a careful mask of maternal concern. George sat at the head of the table, several folders arranged precisely before him. The surprise on my parents' faces when they saw Susan was almost worth the entire ordeal. Marie, Mother said, rising as if to embrace me. Who is this? I stepped back from her approach. This is Susan Park, my attorney. I believe we're here to discuss the illegal management of my trust fund. Father's face darkened. There's no need for outside counsel. This is a family matter. You made it very clear that I am not family, I replied, taking a seat across from them. Mississippi Park stays. George cleared his throat. Now that everyone is here, let's review the situation. The trust established by Rose Anderson for her granddaughter Marie stipulated distribution upon completion of graduate education. That condition has been met. The trust, currently valued at approximately $2.3 million, should be transferred to Marie's control immediately. Father leaned forward. Before we proceed with any transfers, I think we all agree that family unity is paramount. Marie, your mother and I have discussed the unfortunate events of last week. And we're willing to put that unpleasantness behind us. I noticed he didn't actually apologize. Typical. Mother reached across the table as if to take my hand, but I kept mine firmly in my lap. Darling, you know how your father gets when he's passionate about something. The things he said, they weren't meant literally. Of course, you're still part of the family. Susan spoke up. My client appreciates the sentiment, but we're here to discuss the trust. We'll need complete documentation of all transactions involving trust assets over the past 12 years, including any loans made using the trust as collateral. Father's false warmth vanished instantly. That won't be necessary. We have a proposal that resolves everything amicably." He nodded to George, who reluctantly slid a document across the table. "I recognized it as a trust transfer agreement, but with modifications. We're prepared to acknowledge your right to the trust," Father said smoothly. "But as family, we know you'll want to support the Anderson legacy. This agreement simply restructures the assets to better integrate with our overall family holdings." Susan picked up the document and scanned it. Her eyebrows rose. "Mr. Anderson, this agreement would effectively transfer control of the trust assets to Anderson Development Corporation. Your daughter would receive a small annual distribution but would forfeit any actual control. It provides financial security while keeping the family interests aligned," he countered. "It's a win-win." I felt a familiar sensation rising within me, the same mixture of anger and disappointment I had experienced throughout my childhood whenever my authentic self collided with my parents' expectations surged within me. But this time, something was different. I wasn't a child anymore, desperate for their approval. I was a Harvard-educated attorney being offered a blatantly self-serving deal by people who had discarded me a week ago. A memory surfaced suddenly. I was 12, showing my grandmother a story I had written for school. Unlike my parents, who criticized its lack of practical value, Grandma Rose had read every word, then looked at me with those kind eyes so unlike her son's. "Marie," she had said, "you have a gift for seeing the truth of things. Never let anyone take that from you, not even family, especially not family." Now I understood why she had structured my trust differently from my siblings. She had known. She had seen the dynamic in our family and had created a safety net for me, knowing this day might come. I pushed the document back across the table. "No," Father blinked, genuinely surprised. "I don't think you understand what's being offered here." "I understand perfectly," I said, my voice steady. "You disowned me, cut me off financially, and are now attempting to manipulate me because you've been caught misusing funds that legally belong to me." "Marie," Mother interjected. "Your father is offering to welcome you back into the family. On the condition that I sign over my inheritance," I finished for her. "That's not family. That's a business transaction." Father's face was turning that familiar shade of crimson. "This attitude is precisely why we've had problems. You've always been ungrateful for the advantages we've given you." Susan stepped in. "Mr. Anderson, let me be clear. My client is entitled to full control of her trust effective immediately. Furthermore, as trustees, you and Mrs. Anderson have violated your fiduciary duty by leveraging these assets for family business purposes without proper authorization." "That's absurd," Father sputtered. "Everything we did was for the benefit of all the Anderson holdings." George looked pained but spoke up. "James, I've reviewed the documentation. The loans against Marie's trust were specifically prohibited by the terms your mother established." For the first time, I saw fear flicker across my father's face. He turned to me, switching tactics. "Marie, be reasonable. If you pursue this adversarially, you'll never work in this city. Our family has connections throughout the legal community. One word from me, and that little legal aid position you're so proud of will disappear." I felt a chill at his threat, knowing it wasn't entirely empty. The Anderson name did carry weight. But I also knew something he didn't. I no longer feared losing their world. I had seen beyond it now. "Is that really the approach you want to take?" I asked quietly. "Threatening me?" "Because Mississippi Park has prepared documentation for the probate court outlining all the improper financial movements from my trust. I'm sure the Massachusetts Bar Association would also be interested in how a prominent businessman attempted to pressure a new attorney with threats." The door opened, and Thomas walked in, followed by Amanda. Apparently, my parents had called in reinforcements. "Marie," Thomas said in that reasonable big brother voice he used when attempting to manage a situation, "you're taking this too far. We're family. We work things out together, not with outside lawyers and threats." Amanda said nothing, but I could see the conflict in her eyes. I turned back to my parents. "I'm not the one who took this too far. You are the ones who told me I wasn't part of this family anymore. You are the ones who threw me out without a second thought. You are the ones who illegally used my inheritance. And now that you're caught, you expect me to simply forget all that because of family loyalty. Loyalty goes both ways." Father stood abruptly. "I've heard enough. Either you sign the agreement and return to the family on our terms, or you can pursue this legally and ensure you never have a relationship with any of us again. Your choice." It was the same ultimatum he'd used my entire life, his way or nothing. But this time, I saw it for what it was, a desperate attempt to maintain control. I stood as well. "I choose me. I choose the path Grandma Rose believed in enough to protect. I choose a life where I'm valued for who I am, not for what I can add to the Anderson balance sheet." I turned to leave. Susan gathering her materials beside me. "You'll regret this," Father called after me. "Without us, you're nothing." I paused at the door and looked back at my family, my controlling father, my appearance-obsessed mother, my conformist brother. Only Amanda showed any sign of understanding in her eyes. Actually, I said with a calm I truly felt. I think I'm just beginning to discover who I really am. As the elevator doors closed behind us, Susan smiled. That was impressive. Most people cave when faced with that kind of family pressure. I had 16 years of practice standing up to them, I said. I just never had the power to walk away before. As we stepped out into the bright Boston afternoon, I felt lighter than I had in years. The pain wasn't gone. 2 decades of conditional love don't heal overnight, but for the first time, I could see a future determined by my own values. Not theirs. The first thing I did after gaining control of my trust was nothing. Susan advised me to take time before making any major financial decisions, and I agreed. After years of having no say in my financial life, I wanted to proceed thoughtfully. I moved out of Jasmine's apartment with profound gratitude for her support during my darkest days. Instead of returning to a luxury building, I found a modest one-bedroom in Jamaica Plain, a diverse neighborhood I had never explored during my sheltered upbringing. The apartment was small by Anderson standards, but it was mine, purchased outright with a portion of my trust. When my position at Boston Legal Aid Foundation officially began, I threw myself into the work. The starting salary that had seemed terrifyingly inadequate weeks earlier no longer concerned me. I had financial security, but chose to live primarily on my earned income. Preserving the trust for meaningful long-term investments. My first cases were challenging but fulfilling: tenant eviction defenses, domestic violence protection orders, public benefits appeals. Each client had a story of systems failing them, of powerful interests dismissing their humanity. I recognized the patterns from my own experience, though my privilege had shielded me from the worst consequences. 2 months after the confrontation in George's office, Amanda called me. She had never been as entrenched in father's worldview as Thomas, and curiosity finally overcame family pressure. Can we meet? She asked tentatively. Just the two of us. We met at a casual cafe in my new neighborhood, far from the upscale establishments our family frequented. Amanda looked both out of place and intrigued in her designer clothes. So this is how the other half lives, she joked weakly. Gesturing at the mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. Most of the world lives this way, or with far less, I pointed out. Our bubble was the exception, not the rule. Over the next 2 hours, we talked more honestly than we ever had. She admitted envying my courage to break away. I confessed the pain and fear I still felt despite my newfound independence. Father's using your empty seat at dinner to remind us all what happens to those who defy him, she said. But I think he's actually scared. The business isn't doing as well without access to your trust as leverage. I'm not happy about that, I admitted. I never wanted to hurt the family business or the people who work there. Maybe you could help, she suggested. Not by giving in, but by using your legal skills to advise them properly. I considered it briefly, but shook my head. They don't want my help. They want my compliance. There's a difference. As autumn turned to winter, I established a routine in my new life. Weekdays were dedicated to my clients' evenings, and weekends I spent building a community beyond the restricted social circle of my upbringing. I joined a local community garden, volunteered at a youth writing program, and even started dating someone I met at a neighborhood potluck, a high school history teacher with no connection to Boston's elite. The holidays approached, the first I would spend without family. The prospect was both liberating and terrifying. Jasmine invited me to join her family's Thanksgiving, a chaotic, loving gathering that bore no resemblance to the formal, appearance-focused holidays of my childhood. During the meal, Jasmine's father raised his glass. To Marie, he said warmly, the newest member of our chosen family. The simple acceptance brought tears to my eyes. This was what family should feel like, unconditional welcome rather than constant evaluation. As Christmas neared, I received an unexpected call from Margaret Wilson, one of my grandmother's oldest friends. I'd met her a few times as a child but hadn't spoken to her in years. Marie, she said when we met for tea, your grandmother would be so proud of you. You know about everything that's happened? I asked, surprised. She smiled gently. Boston's old money circle talks, dear. But more importantly, Rose always knew you were different from the rest of them. She saw herself in you. I didn't know Grandma Rose had conflicts with the family too, I admitted. Margaret nodded. Why do you think she set up your trust the way she did? She fought the same battles with her husband that you fought with James. The difference is she never found the courage to break free. She wanted to make sure you could if you needed to. That conversation healed something in me. I had been carrying a sense of failure for not fitting into my family. Learning that my grandmother had seen and valued my difference, had even experienced it herself, transformed my understanding of my own story. In January, I used a portion of my trust to establish a scholarship for law students pursuing public interest careers who came from challenging family backgrounds. The Rose Anderson Fellowship would ensure others could follow their authentic path even without family support. My work at the Legal Aid Clinic began to gain notice. I won a significant case against a predatory landlord who had been systematically evicting immigrant families. The victory set a precedent that would protect hundreds of vulnerable tenants. The Boston Globe ran a small feature on the case. The reporter asked about my background, clearly recognizing the Anderson name. I spoke truthfully, but without bitterness, about choosing a different path from my family's expectations. The day after the article appeared, I received another text from my mother. We saw the newspaper. Your father is concerned about the family image. Please be discreet in future press interactions. No congratulations on the victory. No recognition of the lives I'd helped. Just concern about appearances. Her message confirmed I'd made the right choice. 6 months after being disowned, I attended a fundraising gala for legal aid organizations across Massachusetts. As a staff attorney, I normally wouldn't have been invited, but the organizers wanted me there because of the recent high-profile case. I wore a simple but elegant black dress rather than the designer gowns of my past. My grandmother's pearl earrings complemented my outfit. I had used some of my trust to buy back her necklace from the pawn shop as soon as I could. I was chatting with a judge when I felt a familiar presence. Turning, I found myself face to face with my parents for the first time since the confrontation in George's office. Father looked older, the stress of recent business challenges evident in the new lines around his eyes. Mother was immaculate as always, not a hair out of place, though her smile seemed forced. Marie, she said, air kissing near my cheeks as if nothing had happened between us. How lovely to see you. Father nodded stiffly. You're looking well. The judge, sensing tension, excused herself. I am well, I replied simply. My work is fulfilling. Yes, we read about your case, Father said, managing to make it sound trivial. I hope you're being careful about antagonizing the real estate community. They have long memories. I'm representing people who deserve justice, I replied. That's all that matters to me. A familiar flash of disappointment crossed his face. You always did miss the bigger picture. Actually, I think I finally see it clearly, I countered. There's more to life than profit margins and social standing. Before he could respond, a young attorney from another nonprofit approached us. Are you Marie Anderson? He asked excitedly. Your strategy in the Riverview Apartments case was brilliant. We're using it as a template for our own litigation in Worcester. The pride I felt in that moment contrasted sharply with the dismissal in my father's eyes. Two different worlds, two different value systems colliding in this crowded room. We should go, Mother said to Father, clearly uncomfortable with this public evidence of my success outside their control. The Lawrences are expecting us. As they turned to leave, Father paused. The family business is struggling. Marie, without the leveraging options we previously had, we've had to scale back considerably. Thomas is doing his best, but we could use your cooperation. It was as close to an admission of need as he'd ever expressed. Yet still framed as my problem to solve. I'm sorry to hear about the difficulties, I said sincerely. But my trust isn't a family slush fund. It was Grandma Rose's gift to me, not to Anderson Development. He stiffened. You truly have turned your back on everything we built for you. No, I corrected him gently. I've simply built something new for myself, something Grandma Rose would be proud of. As they walked away, I realized something profound. I no longer needed their approval. The ache of rejection remained, but it no longer defined me. I had found my own path, my own definition of success. My own family of choice. That night, looking out at the Boston skyline from my modest apartment, I felt a sense of peace I had never known in the grand family mansion. I was Marie Anderson, not just an Anderson. For the first time in my life, that was enough. 1 year after that fateful family dinner, my life had transformed in ways I could never have imagined. My small Jamaica Plain apartment had become a true home, filled with secondhand furniture chosen for comfort rather than status, and walls adorned with local art that spoke to me rather than investment pieces selected for prestige. I had built a circle of friends who knew me for myself, not my family name. My work at Boston Legal Aid had evolved beyond entry-level cases. I now headed a small team focused on housing justice, mentoring newer attorneys while maintaining my own caseload. The salary remained modest by Anderson standards, but it was enough for my needs, and the trust ensured I could focus on impact rather than income. The Rose Anderson Fellowship had selected its first recipient, a brilliant first-generation law student who had been homeless as a teenager. Watching her pursue her dreams without financial anxiety brought me a deeper satisfaction than any luxury purchase ever had. Amanda and I maintained our reconnection, meeting monthly for coffee or dinner. She had begun questioning the family values in ways that worried our parents, inspired partly by my example. Have you thought about what you'll do when the trust comes to you next year? I asked during one of our meetups. She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. I'm not sure yet, but I know I don't want Father controlling it. I've been talking to Susan about setting up proper protections. Her growing independence had strained her relationship with our parents, though not to the breaking point I had experienced. Thomas, meanwhile, had doubled down on his loyalty to father, barely acknowledging my existence when we occasionally crossed paths at social events. The family business had stabilized after initial struggles, though father had been forced to sell one of their development properties to cover cash flow issues. According to Amanda, he still blamed me for their financial challenges rather than acknowledging his own improper use of my trust. In early spring, I received an invitation that surprised me, the annual Anderson family Easter brunch. This elaborate affair was traditionally held at my parents' home and attended by extended family and close business associates. I had assumed my name was permanently removed from such guest lists. The handwritten note accompanying the formal invitation read simply, "Family should be together for holidays, Mother." I showed it to Jasmine, who had remained my closest friend despite my move to my own place. "Are you going to go?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to show them I've moved on and am happy without their approval. But another part fears being pulled back into their world, even briefly. After much consideration, I declined the invitation politely but firmly. I wasn't ready to re-enter that environment, especially not for an event designed to showcase family unity for social benefit rather than genuine reconciliation. Instead, I spent Easter Sunday volunteering at a community meal program with friends from my neighborhood. The joy and connection I felt there confirmed I had made the right choice. 2 weeks later, I was shopping at a local farmer's market when I quite literally bumped into my parents. They were visiting the upscale gourmet section, looking oddly out of place among the diverse crowd in their carefully coordinated country club attire. Mother recovered first. "Marie, what a surprise. I live in this neighborhood," I explained, gesturing to my shopping bag filled with local produce. "What brings you here?" "Your father has been advised to eat more organic food," she said, sounding slightly embarrassed to be caught in such a public market. "His doctor suggested we might find some acceptable options here." The awkward conversation might have ended there. But a small child ran past, bumping my mother's designer purse and causing her to step back directly into a puddle, ruining her expensive shoes. Rather than the expected outburst about careless parents and ruined Italian leather, I watched in surprise as my father steadied her silently, concern evident in his face. He looked older, more vulnerable than I remembered. "Are you all right, James?" I asked, noting the slight tremor in his hand. "Minor heart issue," he dismissed, though the tightness around his eyes told a different story. "Nothing serious." Mother glanced between us, then made an unexpected decision. "Perhaps we could get some coffee. There's a place just there." 20 minutes later, we sat at a small table in a local cafe I frequented, a scene so divorced from our usual family interactions that it felt almost surreal. The conversation was stilted, focusing on safe topics, the unusually warm spring, Thomas and Stephanie's new house, a mutual acquaintance's recent retirement. I noticed my father watching me carefully, assessing. I could almost see the calculations behind his eyes, weighing pride against other considerations. Finally, he spoke directly. "You seem well." Coming from him, it was almost a compliment. "I am well," I confirmed. "My work is meaningful, and I've built a good life here." "A life completely separate from your family," he noted. A hint of the old bitterness creeping in, from the family business and expectations. "Yes," I clarified. "But not necessarily from individual family members who respect my choices." Mother set down her cup with a small clink. "We saw that article about your work in Boston Magazine, the profile on community advocates." I nodded, surprised they'd noticed. It had been a small piece, nothing that would normally register in their world. "The writer made you sound quite effective," Father said. Clearly struggling to find neutral terminology for work he still didn't value. "I help people who need it," I said simply. "That's all I've ever wanted to do." An uncomfortable silence fell. I realized they were waiting for something, an opening, perhaps, to resume our old relationship on their terms. "I've learned a lot this past year," I said finally. "About myself, about what matters to me, about what family should be." "And what should it be, according to Marie Anderson?" Father asked, unable to keep a slight edge from his voice. I met his gaze directly. "Acceptance without conditions. Support without control. Love without agenda." "Rather idealistic," he scoffed, but with less conviction than before. "Maybe," I acknowledged. "But it's what I needed, and never received from you." Mother flinched slightly, but Father's expression remained carefully neutral. I continued, feeling a calm certainty. "I don't hate you. I don't even blame you anymore. You did what you thought was right based on your values. But they aren't my values, and they never will be." Father started to speak, probably to defend their approach, but Mother touched his arm lightly. He subsided, a small change that spoke volumes about shifts in their own dynamic. "Is there no way back?" she asked quietly. "To being a family again?" I considered her question seriously. "Not back. No. The relationship we had wasn't healthy for any of us. But forward, possibly. If you can accept who I am, not who you wanted me to be. Father looked away, clearly struggling with this concept so foreign to his controlling nature. I stood, knowing we had reached the limit of progress for one unexpected encounter. My door is open if you ever want to know the real me, not just the disappointing daughter who wouldn't follow the Anderson plan. As I turned to leave, my father called after me. Your grandmother would be proud. The words, so unexpected, stopped me in my tracks. I looked back, searching his face for sarcasm or manipulation, but found only tired resignation and perhaps the faintest hint of respect. Yes, I agreed. I think she would. Walking home through the neighborhood that had embraced me, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The pain of rejection had shaped me, but no longer defined me. The family I was born into had cast me out, but in that exile, I had found my true self. The wealth my grandmother left me provided security. But the real inheritance was her courage, the example she set of staying true to one's values even when it meant standing alone. My trust fund gave me freedom, but my choices gave me purpose. Family, I had learned, was not just about blood and names and legacies. It was about being seen and accepted for who you truly are. Sometimes you find that within your birth family. Sometimes you must create it for yourself among those who choose you as you choose them. As for my parents, only time would tell if they could evolve beyond the rigid expectations that had cost them a daughter. I had left the door open, but I would never again shrink myself to fit through theirs. Have you ever had to choose between being true to yourself and meeting others' expectations? Drop a comment below about how you navigated that difficult choice. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to forge their own path. Thank you for listening to my journey from rejection to self-discovery. Remember, sometimes the family we create means more than the one we're born into.